Popcorns or baubles are very, very easy to knit on a knitting machine, and I'm going to show you this example with a contrasting color so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now, this is the first way that I learned to knit popcorns, and it isn't the most expedient, and it isn't even the neatest, but it's the easiest to understand, so let me start with this one. I'm knitting 5 extra rows on these 2 needles with that separate strand of yarn. And then I'm going to fish around down here at the very beginning to pick up the very first stitches, like all those other rows never even happened. And I'll hang them up on here. And then if I wanted to knit another popcorn in the same row, I could carry it right across the back for a short distance and do the same thing again. I'm going to knit 5 rows. Notice I have to do some finger tensioning. I'm going to make sure that the yarn always goes into the hook of the needle before the latch closes, like so. And after those 5 rows, pick up the first row. Sometimes it's easier to grab that stitch than others. Sometimes you have to really poke around. And I'll show you a way to eliminate that poking as well. Rather than using a separate strand, it's a whole lot faster if you use the bridging technique. So you can work continuously from the carriage and work one popcorn after another with no ends to worry about. So I'm going to leave a 4-stitch bridge, or the connecting stitches from one popcorn to the next, right here at the edge, and then a 2-stitch popcorn. And I'm going to hold all the other needles in the row, knit 1 row across both the bridge and the popcorn needles, and then hold the bridge, so that the only needles still knitting are the 2 that are going to form the popcorn. They've already knitted 1 row. Here's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and the 5th row on this popcorn will also knit across the next bridge and the next 2 popcorn needles. So the 5th row here will form the 1st row over here. And before I go any further, I'll fish around down here, pick up the beginning of that row where the popcorn is placed, and hang those stitches right up onto the needles and hold them, because that popcorn is done. And then I'm going to hold the 3-stitch bridge leading up to the next popcorn, and I'm going to continue making popcorns. That's got 1 row, 2, 3, 4. The 5th row on this popcorn will knit across the 3-stitch bridge and the 1st row of the next popcorn. And then once again, I need to kind of fish around here. And got 1. And pick up the 1st row of that popcorn. Hang it, and then hold the bridge. Now, there's an even faster way where we can eliminate some of that poking around. I'm going to insert one of the 2-prong tools right underneath the purl bumps on those 2 popcorn stitches. Pull back on the needles a little bit will help you position the tool in those purl stitches, and then we're going to flip the tool down for some tension and knit the remaining rows. 2, 3, 4, and the 5th row will bridge us out to the end of the row. And then at this point, I'm just going to switch off the tools. So one comes from below, the other one is pulled away, and the stitches are hung on the needles. And then I can continue knitting. And unlike this method with the separate strand, there are no strings on the back of the fabric. It's a nice clean back, and you'll see in a second that the popcorns are perfect. Now, usually you pull a fabric to align the stitches. In this case, these popcorns are sitting on the surface. They're not part of it. So we'll just give them an initial tweak to help them pull into shape. They'll stay like that after this, and then you go, perfect popcorns. You can use the same exact method to knit 3-stitch popcorns, but I think you'll see that they look a little more like pleats than rounded popcorns. Same method. I'm going to knit across the first bridge and the first 3 popcorn needles, and then I'm going to hold the bridge and then pull back on the butts of those needles a little bit to make it easier to get in there. Insert a 3-prong tool from above through the purl bumps at the base of each stitch and drop the tool forward for tension, and then I'm going to knit 5 rows. So 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th row runs right across to the next popcorn. And then I will lift this tool up, insert the second tool from below, hang it on the needles, and pull those needles right out to hold because they're done. Hold the bridge in between, and then I'm ready to do the second popcorn. So I'm going to catch those purl bumps, drop the tool forward, and knit 4 more rows. So 2, 3, 4, and actually let's make this one a little bigger and see what happens. 5, 6, 7, and once again I'm going to switch tools, but you need to know that even if I did that by mistake, the stitches can't run. It was just these very first stitches down at the bottom that were picked up to begin with. So I can just go back, fish around for them, and hang them where they should be. So you can't lose anything by trying the 2-tool method. Once again, bridge needles into holding position, pull back slightly on the popcorn needles so that I can see those 3 purl bumps. Pass the tool to the front for some tension, and complete the row. And when we flip it over, you can see that these really do look more like little pleats than round popcorns or baubles, even when I pull them up into shape. This was 5 rows, this was 7, and then this one over here was 5 again. So they're serviceable, but they're not really round. And next time I'll show you how to make perfectly round 3-stitch and 5-stitch popcorns.